I'm Dennis Tate.
Number one, this is ring announcer Thomas Triber. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time has arrived for Inside Boxing Weekly. So here are your hosts, Mike Goodpaster, John Einreinhofer, and Jeremiah Preisser on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. And, of course, Thomas Triber does our introduction every week, and it was his birthday a couple days ago, so we want to wish Thomas happy birthday. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and before I welcome in my co-host, I, of course, want to bring up the fact that we're brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation. You can go to Facebook and look up the Retired Boxers Foundation there. You can find that. Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos both do a great job with that, so make sure you check that out. My co-host, of course, I mean, he needs no introduction the world over. Jeremiah Preisser.
None at all. Thank you very much, Mike. Let's get it going.
All right, and we go from a man of few words to a man of many words. John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
I'm ready to let my many words out. And let me say, Jeremiah Preisser does need no introduction compared to Gilberto Ramirez's opponent coming up. He needs a lot of introduction.
All right, so I'd rather watch Jeremiah fight Gilberto Ramirez, to tell you the truth. And I think it would be a great match.
Jeremiah may get a shot at Gilberto Ramirez on ESPN in the near future.
Hell, all three of us might get a shot eventually. I just got to drop some weight because I'm more likely to fight Wilder or Joshua, which could possibly happen in the next 2 years. We're going to start off by talking about Friday night, Detroit, Michigan. We usually don't talk about women's boxing, but let's face it, men's boxing does not put the best fighters together, and neither does women's. But they may put together Shields and Hammer. We'll talk first about Tori Nelson against Christina Hammer. When I look at this fight, it's the first time that I'd seen Hammer except for a couple short YouTube videos, Jeremiah. And actually, she has some skill.
Yeah, I agree. Her style reminds me of the stereotypical European style. She's pretty upright, pretty stiff, but she's working the jab pretty well. I mean, it was active. It wasn't always accurate, but she just kept banging away with it. She looked her best when she was unleashing combos, and she won a pretty hefty decision. I mean, I watched the fight and came away with a more positive opinion of Christina Hammer, at least relative to her going into the fight with Shields than I did before. But yeah, she put on a good performance. She dominated. Nelson was just completely outboxed, and kudos to her. And I think Hammer herself is from Kazakhstan. So Golovkin. Yeah, Golovkin's part of the woods, but yeah, again with that style, you can see that it was shaped and molded in a place like Germany. But yeah, that's all I've got about for her.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, John, they are different than the men if they actually fight after this, because if they do actually fight after this, the fact that they had this fight on Showtime, and I can see Christina Hammer, does make me interested in wanting to see this fight as long as they do it right away.
Yeah, I basically concur. I mean, Christina Hammer has shown, me as well. She's a good enough of a fighter. My objection is just I don't want to see mismatches in the women's game any more than I do in the men's, and I just feel we're wasting all kinds of slots. I don't feel that these mismatches belong on premium cable for the men or the women, and you look at the boxing landscape, it's always been a problem, but it's getting a lot worse.
Yeah,
and we'll
but John, Tori Nelson
coming up.
Tori Nelson is a former women's female middleweight champion, and I think she was a server at a restaurant. So, I mean, you really can't say that she's not a high-quality boxer.
Well, it's just the mismatches, the mismatches are worse in the women's game because the depth is not there overall. But, the women have been fighting in the Olympics now for a while, and there's a chance to gradually build up some more depth, but it's not there yet. But, I think to me, the way I would like to have had this gone is that let's just introduce women's boxing basically on reintroduce basically on Showtime HBO recently showed their first women's fight with something like Hammer Shields, not this other stuff we're seeing. That's my gripe. I mean, let's get right to, since we don't have depth, let's get right to the best, try to build a following that way, instead of doing basically, which does not work in the men's game.
Yeah, but John,
it's hurt the sport over 30 years. These mixed matches.
Shields against Gabriel's was mildly interesting for 2 to 3 rounds, though. That's better than most fights we get for the men anymore.
It was, because Shields got knocked down, and we weren't expecting that. But it just wasn't. It wasn't something that was competitive, expected to be competitive going in. And even though we got a bit of a surprise, the end result was the same. So I just feel like we're marking time in the women's game just like we are in the men's game, and we don't need it.
All right, of course. Jeremiah, do you want to talk about this? Because I'm really tired of it. But if you want to, I'll let you say something.
Are you talking about I don't know. I mean, I will say that, it seems as if Hammer and, Clarissa Shields are going to get together. And I mean, that's really all you can ask for. I mean, they both seem like they want it. You can see the post-fight animosity between the two. I mean, you're going to get it. I mean, for people who are into this sort of thing, you'll be happy. You'll be happy when you get it. But I mean, it's not particularly interesting to me. I mean, it's always hard to, because Hammer is, when you're not fluent in English, it's hard to relate as an English-speaking person. And Clarissa,
Clarissa Shields is not real fluent in English either, really. So
no, she's got a Flint accent, and it's always no. But the thing about Clarissa Shields is, maybe you guys disagree with me, but I'm not sure that she's going to be a big sell. I mean, on Twitter and whatnot, on the microphone, she's brash. She's sort of in your face, but she doesn't have a lot of power, right? It's not as if she's, Ann Wolfe out there, or, even Layla Ali in that regard. So she doesn't have a ton of power. So that is going to turn people away. Again, she's brash. She's not particularly good looking.
That's
for
mean.
Me.
That's so sexist. But, you're a misogynist. You probably voted for Donald Trump.
Well, but there's truth to that, right? I mean, people who are physically attractive always garner more followers than people who are not. I mean, it's just the way of the world. You're more likely to open a door for a pretty girl than an ugly girl. I
open a door for men even, because I'm just a decent human being. And you know what? Okay. I bet John Einreinhofer opens the door for everybody too.
I try to, but I think Jeremiah is making a good point, though, just about general marketing principles. That's all.
I know. And
right?
The thing is this: Clarissa Shields, to me, has the personality of Deontay Wilder.
I mean, the women like. Yes. I mean, the women liked Oscar De La Hoya, so it helped him.
Yeah, and he liked to be
come
a
off
woman,
his Olympic
so
gold
it
medal.
worked out great for both sides.
It didn't work out for the women.
Well, it did for the ones that got to use the kitchen utensils on him.
Outside of Oscar's personal life, he was popular with the women in a general marketing sense. So, these things can matter in marketability.
Well, I don't think she is like god awful ugly. I mean, Jeremiah, she's just not real attractive. Let's get off of this before we have a bunch of feminists, social justice warriors attacking us. We got Miguel Berchelt. Actually, WBC World Super Featherweight title against Jonathan Victor Barros. I think this is the kind of fight you're talking about, John.
Mike, I'm glad you brought it up, because you're right. That's exactly the kind of fight I'm talking about. I mean, we get this promo with this new ESPN Plus thing that you're supposed to pay for. This is Berchelt. What is this, in his second straight mismatch, and it's supposedly a title defense? The guy, I mean, here's how bad it is to me, and this is where boxing just isn't going to make it as a sport in the long run if this kind of thing keeps happening. I think you saw it with the Berchelt fight, and I also was then somehow I was watching Golden Boy on ESPN earlier that night in one of the undercard bouts when a guy with a 7-16 record went down, and the referee rushed in immediately as soon as the guy went down and there was no 10 count and waving off the fight. And my point is, if everybody, including the referee, knows that these fights are such gross mismatches going in that we can't even reach the count of 2 when a guy hits the canvas before they're wildly waving off the fight, why are we having the fight? Why is it on national TV? Or I don't know if you want to call ESPN Plus app national TV. I don't think it deserves to be called that.
Oh, yes, it does. It is a great app. I spent my entire Saturday watching it. I watched the fights from England there, and before that, I watched the All Blacks from New Zealand play France, and I watched like 3 rugby matches. It's worth it to me because I like rugby. It's the only place you can see it. My point, John, is this. Right now, if we had a year-end award almost halfway through the year, there's nothing that sticks out in my mind as being a fight of the year.
I could go back and think of a few, but
I
don't like Gassy Evans.
In 1980, when you had a fight of the year, you knew what it was, and there was multiple ones, and you didn't have to think about it; it would just pop into your head.
Yeah, you always had a lot of contenders or something such. I like Gassy Evans, Dornicos, but there's not a lot. There's not a lot this year, and what the heck, we're halfway through the year.
But that's not like a great fight. I didn't think. I thought it was a very good fight.
It was good, but we're halfway. Yeah, but to your point, we're halfway through the year. On Monday, July 1st. So this is not. And when you look at the calendar coming up with what's signed, and a lot of these are on like ESPN, HBO, Showtime. I mean, just plain old bad fights that fans are being asked basically to pay for, through their premium cable or the ESPN app, or we got the DAZN coming out, with Eddie Hearn. God knows what kind of mismatches Eddie Hearn's going to have for us for $21 a month on DAZN. I mean, I have to laugh even just
I will
thinking
bring
about
this
it. So
up,
ridiculous.
though. There was one terrific fight this past weekend. That was Victor Postol against Josh Taylor. It's a fight I had scored for Taylor by like 2 points. I don't know what the hell the officials were looking at, Jeremiah. But this was a good fight, and the thing that impressed me about Taylor is I thought Postol pretty much dominated the first half of the fight. Taylor's a younger guy, never been in a situation like that against a veteran, and he really looked good over the last 4 or 5 rounds.
Yeah, I was impressed because, sometimes you figure, of course it could go either way because, Postol was a little bit older, Taylor a bit younger. But, of course, when a guy's stepping up to the plate like that, you always have a question about how their stamina is going to be because a lot of times you got to build that. But, I had it 5-2 in Postol's favorite after 7. It looked like Taylor. I thought the third was a swing round, but it looked like Postol was jabbing nicely. He was establishing distance. He was kind of pecking with some of his punches, which was unfortunate. But he was banging to the body with that right hook nicely. You could see that at times Taylor was bothered by it. It was a good fight, and this is the problem. You reference the scorecards, and this is. Like mismatches, this has been a problem with boxing for many, many years as well. It's, you're robbing a guy of a fair chance when you're filling out the scorecards before the fight is even done. I mean, I didn't see anybody who scored that fight wide. I was hanging out with Brits the entire time the fight was going on, and just about all of them had it about dead even. In fact, that was the general feeling going into the 10th round, that it was borderline even.
The knockdown was the difference in the fight to me.
Exactly. Again, everybody had it about even, going into the 10th round. You get a knockdown. Okay, Taylor finishes strong. Okay, fair enough. He deserved the win. Good for him. We're talking about a kid who doesn't have very many fights at all. There's room for improvement, but I like what I see so far. Against a veteran who's smart, crafty, technically solid. He adapted. He was able to overcome. And, now he can move on to bigger and better things. And that's a good thing about, again, we're not big fans of the 17 weight divisions, but that's a good thing about the 140-pound division now is there's a lot of young upstarts like Prograis, who John referenced earlier, and, and others, Relic, the guy who just joined the World Boxing Super Series. There's something to look at there. And what I like about Taylor as well is he's part of a newer trend, and this is, one of the positive aspects of boxing that we can, shed light on, is Taylor moved up in class quickly, so he fought Postal. Before that, he fought Miguel Vasquez, who, stylistically is a tough outing for just about anybody, awkward guy, real spoiler type. But you see these guys moving quickly. Josh Taylor, Joe Joyce isn't spending that much time messing around. Anthony Joshua did not spend that much time. Obviously, Lomachenko and Gwozdzik and many others. So that I like to see. Taylor, though, he has to improve a number of things. He's got to move his head more. He can't rely on, he's fighting when he was fighting these lesser guys, he was trying to be twitchy and counter whenever he could feel it out. But, against guys who are a bit savvier, going to feint you and whatnot, it's going to be a bit tougher. But, the kid's got to jab more. He's got to be more effective if he's going to switch stances, because I noticed against Postal he would go to orthodox, and it just kind of looked unnatural, and he didn't really do anything from the stance. But yeah, there's a lot to look at there. I like what I saw, and the division's going to be interesting here.
Yeah, and I don't think Fernando Barbosa, Victor Laughlin, or Eddie Papeau should ever ref any fight again, John. It was an absolute joke, especially 119 to 108. I mean, you don't have him winning a round, or you have him winning one round.
Yeah, I mean, first let me just compliment the matchup going in, because we've talked about the bad. This was one of the good. I mean, if you are ranking 17 divisions, Postal was still at the top of the 140-pound division. So Josh Taylor was a significant favorite going in, which surprised me. I figured he'd be a favorite, but he's a significant favorite going in. But it was still a good matchup because, again, you look at 17 divisions, Postal was near the top, and like Jeremiah alluded to, it was good to see Taylor stepping up, 12 fights, stepping up instead of just really taking it easy, stepping it up a little bit at this point in his career, because, he ended up showing he could do it. And he did it. I think though I think though there's ways you can look at the scoring of this fight that are sometimes, I think, in boxing where people look at things where they feel like should be fair the way a fight played out, but it's not really. If you're really trying to score the fight fair as it goes along, it's not necessarily the case. Which is, I didn't think it was that close of a fight like a lot of people were complaining. I thought Postal won maybe 4 rounds, and then he got dropped. I thought the rounds were close. I did think the rounds were close, but unless you were doing the thing like I gave a round to Postal, now I got to give a round to Taylor, or vice versa. I just didn't think Postal was winning a lot of those rounds. I thought they were very competitive rounds, and that's where you get that feeling at the end, because Postal was competitive for the full 12 rounds and gave a good effort, that you think, oh, well, it should be close. But I just thought it was a fight where the rounds were competitive. The rounds themselves were close, but I just didn't think Postal was winning them, and that, then Taylor got the knockdown. But with that said, I got a feeling after watching both of these guys for 12 rounds that I think Regis Prograis would probably take out both of these guys. I got to call it like I see it, and after seeing 12 rounds of this, that was my feeling. Now, is Postal better than anybody Prograis fought at this point? Yeah, he is. Prograis was supposed to fight him, and then Postal got the hand injury, and that fight fell out. And, Prograis went on to blow away Ndongo instead. But I got the feeling, Josh Taylor's good. It's good that he tested himself with this fight. I thought he clearly won the fight. Postal gave a good effort, but he's 34. He's been knocked down, I believe, 4 times in his last 3 fights. I don't think he's won a lot of rounds in those last 3 fights. So I think even though he fought pretty well, I don't think he's going to be that much of a factor in the future. And I think things are looking good for Regis Prograis. Unfortunately, even though he's got an ESPN date coming up, it's not against a credible opponent, quite frankly, and that's disappointing.
All right, so Jeremiah, when you score a fight, why do you rotate rounds to keep it close?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. So what I saw, so my perspective, and I think where a lot of people were agreeing with me, is that through the first 5 rounds, Taylor was backing up. Postal was really dictating distance. He was dictating, the feel of the fight. He was the more active of the two. And again, it looked as if Taylor was trying to adapt to him, not vice versa.
Right. We'll go ahead. We'll move on. Daniel Dubois stepped up a little bit in competition against Little. Stopped him, I think it was in the 5th round. What was your take on on Dubois, Jeremiah?
Yeah, he looks good. I mean, yeah, I'm having a hard time with guys like Dubois and a few others because, a lot of these promoters have perfected the art of matchmaking. And, though Dubois looks good, I really want to see him in there with a puncher. I mean, he looks good. I mean, he's solid all around. I mean, there are things to appreciate about his skill set, but I just want to see somebody who's willing to give it back. And until that, I just can't make a clear-eyed decision about who he is or where he's going to go. Yeah, I mean that's what I've got. I mean, right now he's building incrementally, and again he's looking good doing so. But I'm not quite sure where to put my foot right now. Maybe you guys see it differently than I do.
Well, what I saw was this. I was not impressed with the performance. I can tell you what I was impressed with. Yeah, and I know we've talked about this before, Jeremiah, and we both kind of have the same feeling here. The big muscle-bound heavyweights always kind of freak us out because they seem like they get tired. The one thing that I was impressed with was the fact that he threw a fair amount of punches in those 5 rounds, and when the fight was stopped, he wasn't even breathing heavily. That's the best thing I can come away from this performance. John?
Dubois, he's only 20. I'm not going to count him out yet, but he hasn't done anything that's wowed me yet. But he's not a guy I'm writing off or I'm down on. I actually do feel a little bit more about him like Jeremiah does, where I'm not gonna make a call on him being that good yet. But I'm not down on him. He's not a guy that I've decided he's not going anywhere either. He's only 20 with a heavyweight. He's really got a lot of time. So gonna have to see more. I agree with Jeremiah there. And some guys I'll stick my neck out, and I've done on the show plenty of times. I just see something I do like, and I'd be willing to do it. With Dubois, I'm not counting him out, but I haven't seen that performance yet where I'm just like, yeah, this guy's it. He's definitely going to be a feature factor. For me, just the jury's still out on him.
All right, then we got Martin Murray wins a boring 12-round decision over Roberto Garcia. I know this was a late replacement for Billy Joe Saunders. I guess we'll have to give him something for that, John. But I watched the first 2 rounds of this fight, and then I immediately went to my TV on my Fire Stick and searched for Channel 5 out of Scotland to watch Taylor and Postol, and I'm real glad I did.
Yeah, this was, I mean, at best, if your rankings, 17 divisions, Martin Murray's, and for me, he wouldn't even be with 17, but, he's maybe a number 10 middleweight. And then he's fighting this Roberto Garcia guy. They're calling it for the WBC silver middleweight title. Fight a guys without pop. That's just, to me, is just really just like a non-TV fight. So you're getting it here on the ESPN Plus app, which the argument would be, well, you wouldn't even get this fight otherwise. This really is one you don't want to get. So I don't think the ESPN Plus app gave us anything there.
I think it did, because I got to see Dubois. I wasn't wanting to watch Garcia. I didn't want to watch this fight to begin with. I wanted to watch the undercard, because the main event's shit. It just is. I mean,
it was.
Sorry, I know we have Thomas on the show and everything, and I don't know, Thomas don't make the fights, and I'm sorry, but the undercard I found at least mildly entertaining. But the Garcia-Murray fight, I mean,
yeah,
come on. I mean, I would have rather seen Dubois be the main event, because that's what I wanted to see was Dubois. Yeah,
well, yeah, nobody was expecting fireworks here. I mean, the best thing I got out of the card itself actually was the knockout by O'Hara Davies versus Paul Kamanga.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was going to talk about next. You done ruined it.
Well, I mean, we don't really need to go over much of that. Anyways, it's not like Davies is, going to be a top level guy anyways, but the right hand that he landed was good. And, I got to give Martin Murray credit. I mean, he's really a guy who's been plugging away for a long time. He's been, he's more of a throwback fighter than a lot of the guys that we have. I mean, this guy who, fought, went to Argentina, fought Sergio Martinez, fought Golovkin, fought a bunch of guys. Yeah. I mean, he's a guy who deserves credit. Yeah, well, I think
The problem is he doesn't beat anybody. Though. That's the problem.
Well,
the guy's never beaten anybody. That's my gripe with Martin Murray.
That's true, but
he's never beaten anybody.
Yeah, but the Sergio Martinez fight was real damn close. So it's not it's not as if he's
guys. If you watched him fight Felix Sturm, he beat Felix Sturm.
That is true. Yeah,
and that fight wasn't even that close. So.
Yeah, well,
he didn't get the decision, but it's Felix Sturm anyway. Okay. And,
yeah, nobody really gets a decision there.
That was kind of my point. And he got a draw, so that is the same thing as a win. If you get a draw against Felix Sturm, that's like an official win.
Right.
And the thing is this, Murray was tough against a lot of good fighters. It's just he hasn't been tough against anybody since, since Golovkin knocked him out. I mean, since then, George Groves dominated him. Arthur Abraham was a close fight, but he's a good fighter at that time.
Murray was very fortunate to get the decision in the UK against Gabe Rosado. I didn't even think he won that fight.
Yeah, and Rosado, that's what I'm saying. I mean, Martin Murray is done, and he needs to retire before he gets hurt. But he was a good fighter.
That's why he's in with Roberto Garcia, I guess.
Yeah, but he was a good fighter. You can't be a bad fighter and fight the guys he fought and at least give him a fight. So you do have to give him some respect for that, John.
Well, when I talk, I'm talking in perspective. I mean, in the sense that, to be fighting even at that level, of course, he has to have
and it wasn't like he was
some
getting
ability.
Blown out until, Golovkin tore him up.
But it's just, but when we're talking at that level, and I guess when we're talking about that at that level, when we're talking about, even if you're ranking 17 classes, top 5 type guy in the division, he's never really, even to me, been on that level. So, that's the thing when we're getting main events with him at this point. This is the kind of thing I gripe about it in the U.S., gripe about it in the U.K. I just think this is the type of stuff we're getting too much of.
All right, well, let's get to the point here because we can bring up Pablo Baez a lot now as we're going to talk about the fights coming up this week. Gilberto Ramirez fights Romer, Alexis, and Gulo. Jeremiah, I know you've been a huge supporter of Romer, Alexis, and Gulo for years, and you have to be happy he's finally getting a title shot. Much deserved, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I called Angulo, and I know his wife and his family on a personal level, and I called them, and we sat down and had dinner. Saturday night, and I just wished him well. I was real happy for him. I told him if he wanted, I'd sing him, on his way to the ring, and he was like, "Nah, I'm going for something a little more traditional." And we parted ways and, left on good terms. But no, I mean,
all right, wait a second, because now we've found a way to make this fight interesting for me and John. And that's going to be this. And John has seen this done before for the NCAA basketball championships. You know where I'm going with this, don't you, John? Come on, John.
I'm not sure yet, Mike.
Okay.
I'm not sure yet.
If Romer, Alexis, and Gulu beats Gilberto Ramirez, Jeremiah has to sing a song to us on the show next week live. And John Einreinhofer will pick the song. Deal?
Oh, man, I don't care.
All right, there we go. Now go ahead.
Yeah. But, I mean, I really like the guy. No, I mean, I don't know the guy. I mean, have no idea who he is. I mean, he's from Colombia. He's 34 years old. He represents a lot of Colombians in the sense that he has a pretty shiny record on paper, 23 wins, 20 knockouts, but we've seen guys like that in the past. I mean, who's the guy who Kelly Pavlik beat, hung around for a long time and actually could punch, but the guy's beaten nobody of note. it's just a typical Gilberto Ramirez fight. It's like he owns some trinket. People have the audacity to call him a world champion, and he's fighting guys who are no hoper after no hoper. I mean, this is a guy who's supposed to be the top of the division. He's really got to step it up. I mean, especially since the WBSS is over, there's no excuse for this stuff.
All right, John, your turn.
Yeah, we're wasting an ESPN spot on this. I mean, one site's got Gilberto Ramirez a minus 1,700 favorite. Another's got him. William Hill does the odds for. They're going to be doing the odds for a lot of the U.S. states that just legalized sports gambling, including West Virginia. So that matters. New Jersey's got it minus 5,000 with William Hill. Bookmaker minus 2364. This is all for Gilberto Ramirez, and this is going to be an ESPN main event in the U.S. I mean, this is a joke. Top Rank and Aram keep. It's literally amazing. Hardcore boxing fans and journalists have never heard of the guys that he's pulling out for Gilberto Ramirez opponents and making them ESPN main events. And there's just no shame. They just did it with one guy, the guy they brought over from Africa that fought him on ESPN and was just not on this level. And now we got Romer Alexis Angulo for another ESPN main event. I mean, this is not even, they're outsmarting themselves. This is not really building to anything. In other words, we're beyond a point, thank God, really, where, there's not going to be a big Gilberto Ramirez pay-per-view event in the next 2 years where 3 million buys are coming out, at $75 a pop against somebody in the 168-pound division. It's not happening. So
John,
why are you giving it?
This? I think maybe that these promoters have heard you bitch about pay-per-view, so they decided to go ahead and kill it so you didn't have to do it no more. Because
Bravo.
We wanted that, and that's been good.
There's maybe, there's one fight that we know will probably do 1 million buys, Triple G and Canelo. There's a couple of fights that could possibly do it, but they won't fight. I mean, outside of that, there's nothing. We used to joke about the days where we'd get Briggs and Botha on pay-per-view. Hell, we don't even have two heavyweights as good as Briggs and Botha right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there would be a chance for that to be good because I think for the sport to have long-term hope, the pay-per-view had to be killed. And I think we're close to that. But the idea of the pay-per-view being killed would be that at the least, on HBO or Showtime, or if they're going to do it on ESPN now since Top Rank's shifted over to ESPN, that you're going to have these guys in competitive fights against, good opponents that people would be seeing the fights. That was the idea. In other words, a significant amount of people would be seeing the fights, maybe on premium cable or certainly on ESPN. But instead, date after date getting wasted with these mismatches that, a potential new boxing fan flipping channels would look at and say, what is this garbage? I'm not going to, no wonder why nobody watches this sport. It's just sad. It's just sad because we've got a lot of it coming up. So it's not a one-time event. And the undercard fights aren't any better. It's not like they're salvaging it with what they got on the undercard because the undercards have the same kind of mismatches.
Yeah, and we've got a card. Let's see. I'll let Jeremiah's a big Michael Conlon fan, so I'll let him talk about him against Adelson dos Santos.
Conlon's only go ahead a minus 6,000 favorite.
Yeah. I can see that though. He's still young. He's fighting an 8-rounder. I don't have a problem with that. I don't know. I mean, it's just if you're in your first 10 or 12 fights, I don't have a problem with it. But there comes a point where you got to fight somebody. And Gilberto Ramirez has almost won 40 fights and hasn't fought anybody.
Yeah, and what they should. I mean, if you want to be savvy in terms of marketing, why not try to throw him in with Chris Eubank Jr., who's been laid off. I mean, he would have had plenty of time. I mean, I know he got right to training as soon as he was done with his last fight. I mean, at least that's more competitive. I mean, we know that Eubank Jr., regardless if he's not that interesting in terms of personality. They are personalities. Him and his father, they add an interesting dynamic. Again, most people think they're, jerks anyways, but it's at least there's something there. There's something to build on. I mean, it's like a guy like Chris Eubank Jr. is not that big of a threat, right? It's a winnable fight, but there's more tickets to sell, right? It's more recognizable. I don't understand why they don't go that route. I mean, the UK is pretty much where this scene is at the moment. I don't know what they're doing here. I mean, like John said, I don't know what they're building to or what they're doing. I'm just kind of lost here, but I guess go ahead and pad the resume. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, and like I said, we got Michael Conlon fighting over in Belfast. Of course, Thomas Triver will probably be on to talk about that. I think he'll be back next week. Also on that card, Gary Corcoran against Paddy Gallagher, which will be probably an entertaining fight. I mean, anytime you get two guys that are below average, about the same level, and a good style matchup, it should be a good fight. I don't know. It's just...
You're lost here. You're like, what do I do with my hands?
We didn't even have a show last week, did we?
No.
Yeah. Did we? Yeah, we might have with Thomas.
No.
Or was that? No, that was the week before.
Yeah.
I mean, this has gotten to a point where we're in late June, and there's nothing to talk about except for things that could possibly happen someday, but look like they're not going to happen anytime soon. So let's just go to the boxing news, which is the fact that Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua, in my opinion, have no intention of fighting each other at the moment. I think both sides are worried about losing the fight. And I don't care what John says, I don't think either one of these guys want to fight, because my point is this, Jeremiah. If these two guys wanted to fight, they could force it so they could fight. If just one of them wanted to fight real bad, they could force it and get the fight. I mean, one of them could take less money, give the other one more money, and we'd have the fight. The thing is, neither one of them are very good. I know Anthony Joshua in Great Britain, everybody thinks he's already better than Lennox Lewis and going to be a top 10 heavyweight, but he's not. I mean, he's just the best of a bad lot right now. It would be like if you put the Browns and the Jets and, you put the four worst teams in their own division, and then they won the division at 6-10. It doesn't mean they're any good. They're just the best of a shit division. And what I see here is two guys that just don't want to fight. I mean, when Lennox Lewis...
Two guys who suck.
Yeah, they suck. And, Ollie and Frazier fought. Didn't take a long time to get to it. Holmes and Cooney had to dance around for a year or two, but they got to it. Lewis and Holyfield, they got to it. Now, Holyfield, Tyson didn't, because Tyson was afraid of him. But that, and he went to jail for a few years, which always kind of puts a damper in the fights. But when I look at this, and we talked about this earlier, I just don't care about this fight anymore. And they've made it worse because I think we all knew Brazil was going to fight Wilder. I think they signed the damn thing like 2 months ago. This was all just a dog and pony show to mess with the fans.
I think mostly on Eddie Hearn's end it is. I mean, I think, like you said, if they want the fight to be made, it will get done. I don't see any ducking at all. I mean, really, there's nothing out. There's very little outside of that potential matchup anyway. So what I think is I do think that Deontay Wilder would take the fight this year. I do think that he really wants it. But I think Hearn is thinking in terms of long ball, and he wants to build interest, and he's actually done it. I mean, look at the amount of chatter that you've seen on the forums and whatnot. I mean, so much. There's been so much posing and posturing with the negotiations, and it's all confusing. But you got guys jumping on board with one camp or the other camp, and I mean, I've seen a ton of talk, in the boxing groups about this. Oh my, this guy's ducking, this guy's ducking. I see a lot of Americans accusing Joshua ducking, and vice versa. I just think, again, it's all a ploy. I mean, I've been listening to people who have
a ploy on both sides, to tell you the truth, Jeremiah.
Well,
I think both sides know what they're doing, and I mean, Lou DiBella's behind it on the Wilder side, right?
But
he's a scumbag. So what do you expect?
Yeah, I know Rick Glazer isn't too fond of him.
I think DiBella did a great job bringing HBO boxing back, but as a trainer or a promoter, I think he has failed miserably.
Yeah. Well, but again, I think Hearn is just trying to build it up, and I don't really care, honestly. I mean, for me, it's not something that I have to see this year. In fact, I'm not that interested in the bout altogether. Again, I'm still not convinced that this isn't any more than, Michael Grant with a bigger punch and Frank Bruno. I'm not too sure what these guys have. I mean, like you said, the air is so weak. Maybe I'll know a bit more about Joshua after the fight with Povetkin. Maybe Brazil, he's a tough guy. He'll be able to push Wilder. I don't know. I mean, sometimes, with heavyweights, you never know what you're going to get sometimes. I mean, even the most dominant of fighters struggled with guys that are obviously a grade below them, Joe Louis and Galento, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I think with what could potentially happen, I think it's probably best to build towards something and milk it for what it's worth.
Yeah, and I agree because that's what I was saying a year ago. But my point is the way they've done it has turned me off. I mean, number one, I don't want to see Dominic Brazil fight either one of them. I'm fine with Alexander Povetkin getting a shot at one of them because I think Povetkin is a risk at least. I would rather see Kermit Pulov get the fight than Dominic Brazil. John?
I think that this fight, Wilder and Joshua should be happening now. They're clearly the number one and number two heavyweights in the world. There's been a void basically at the lineal level with Tyson Fury's problems. They're both undefeated, big punchers with huge KO percentages. This is a big opportunity for boxing. Joshua was very popular in the UK. The fight should happen now. There's no further building needed. In my opinion, neither guy's afraid of the other one, but Eddie Hearn wants to milk big paydays with Joshua in the UK under the guise to the UK fans that Joshua is the champ, and he doesn't want to risk the Wilder loss until he racks up enough of those paydays. No more building is needed. This would be an exciting fight that have people on the edge of their seats because you don't know what's going to happen with the power of both guys. You got guys this big against each other coming in. You're not sure what's going to happen. Could be a very big fight, could be very good for boxing, but of course boxing's going to blow it. I think the Wilder camp, when you think about it, there's really, I'd be the first to say, I mean, Joshua can make more money continuing to fight on in the UK, and who knows what money Rubinski's chipping in to have Povetkin get this fight. There's money for Joshua to make in the UK. Wilder cannot make that kind of money in the US, but there's one thing that's also not in dispute, that the biggest fight for Wilder and for Joshua is Wilder and Joshua. It's both their biggest payday, so there's no reason for it not to happen now because it's both the most money they make. But Hearn wants to ride out a few more paydays. Then he wants to see about taking the Wilder risk later on after he's racked up a few more paydays with Joshua in the UK against opposition. Povetkin's going into this with Joshua as a minus 900 favorite. He's not the threat that people want to make him out to be at this stage. The guy's 38 years old with two-time PED test failure. He's going to be fighting in the UK. At 38, who knows what he's going to come in with. The guy had a shot against Klitschko for the lineal belt. He failed miserably. He performed miserably.
Come on, you can't hold that against him. That was a Klitschko.
I can say that's just a fact. I'm not interested in seeing Povetkin after two positive PED tests. I'm not interested in Alexander Povetkin get another shot at anything.
You look Canelo. So you don't have a problem with that.
It's just the fact of, hey,
if he was Mexican,
we already got a shot from Povetkin. Povetkin performed miserably against a tall guy. Hearn knows that. Joshua's a big, young, tall guy who's a puncher. So we don't need that. And there's no doubt we don't need Wilder Brazil. Nobody needs that either. We need Wilder Joshua now. The sport could use it. It's going to further damage the sport by the fight being held off. Kevin Isle had a good article about it today. I posted up on my Facebook site and my Twitter. He summed it up. He wrote boxing in Vegas for a long time before, he started writing for Yahoo. He's seen a lot. And, I concur with what he's got to say. It's just boxing damaging itself further. You could have a big fight now. You got Triple G and Canelo 2 at least. You could have this. You're not going to have this. And as we agree, the rest of the year, except for Triple G, Canelo 2 is starting to look a lot like a barren wasteland.
Yeah, but I think what you get with this heavyweight fight would probably set us back too, because you're going to get two guys that aren't going to go after each other, and they're going to stare at each other for 12 rounds, and we saw enough of that. And,
that's what you see continuously.
Yeah, that's all you see. I mean, at least with Klitschko fights, you'd get the knockout at the end. But I don't even know if these guys are going to produce. Let's face it, Luis Ortiz almost beats Wilder, and Ortiz, the morning of the fight, still wasn't approved by the commission because of his blood pressure. I mean, the guy's over 40 years old, and we're going to base Wilder off of that. We're going to base Joshua off of basically standing and staring at, who the hell was it? I don't even remember now.
Klitschko?
No, the other dude.
Joseph Parker.
Yeah, Joseph Parker.
Terrible fight.
See, that's the thing. That's what we're going to get. We're going to get a Parker fight. I mean, if you remember the Wilder-Ortiz fight, I mean, Wilder was afraid to engage. The only time they did is when Ortiz ran into him and tried to engage. To sit there and write off Povetkin may be true because he's a little bit older, but the man has only lost to Vladimir Klitschko, and I guarantee you the Klitschko he lost to would have completely knocked out Joshua or Wilder. I mean, hell, Joshua almost got knocked out by him 3 or 4 or 5 years after Povetkin got beat by him. So I think to write him off because he lost to Klitschko, Vladimir Klitschko is a guy that neither one of these guys will ever be as good as. And I don't think Vladimir Klitschko is a top 10 heavyweight of all time.
Well, and I think that sort of makes the point about how weak the division is. I mean, if Povetkin, a guy who has been ranked inside the top 10 for something like 9 out of the past 11 years or something like that, and, in the top 5 for the majority of those, I mean, we're talking about a guy who's been consistently good, in the third best heavyweight of the Klitschko era behind, Vladimir Vitali. He's done pretty well for himself. And yes, he is old, right? But you get Luis Ortiz too. So what we're saying is that, Joshua is this much better than, potentially the third best heavyweight in the world. I mean, that doesn't really speak well of the division itself. And it does say that, the 1 and 2 guys have to fight soon. I'm just a little bit confused by the play on Wilder's part, if I just don't quite get why they didn't go for somebody like Dillian White. I mean, obviously he would have been available. He could have fought in the UK. I think that would have been good because my problem with Joshua and Wilder is few people know who Anthony Joshua is in the U.S. I mean, it's funny because they kind of documented his stay in the U.S. when he was going to these basketball games and whatnot. I don't know if it was, he was just flying out just to enjoy the games or it was part of, a PR thing. People don't really know him in the U.S. I mean, boxing fans are aware of him, but he's not big here. And then you have Wilder, who's not big in the UK either. I just figured there'd be some cross promotion here. Obviously Joshua fighting Povetkin doesn't really build his thing in the U.S. So he could have fought, somebody like Jarrell Miller, and Wilder could have fought Dillian White. And, I think, again, that could have been some cross promotion here.
I've seen Wilder fight Povetkin because Povetkin's a straight ahead fighter. And I think that somebody that pressures Wilder could give him trouble.
Well, yeah, and I do too. Well, you figure at some point, Wilder's lack of technique, his sloppiness, eventually it's gonna hurt him in the end. I mean, I can't see, I wouldn't favor Joshua or Wilder to have, even if they whoever emerges victorious in their fight, because that fight will happen if they win their fights later this year. I can't see either one of them having a long run. But that also speaks to it too. I mean, because you look at Carlos Takam, who should have went the entire fight against Anthony Joshua. I mean, that stoppage was obviously premature. Povetkin was better, is better than Takam ever was. I mean, it showed that by knocking him out with a flush left hook. But I did want to speak to the WBA ordering thing too, because I thought it was funny, and I was pointing this out on social media. So you have Eddie Hearn, who is buddy with Gilberto Ramirez, the head of the WBA. And all of a sudden, with negotiations, tempers flaring and all this other stuff, all of a sudden the WBA is ordering, quote unquote, Povetkin and Joshua to fight. all that is it's just a BS ploy to make it sound as if there's some urgency there, as if Joshua has to, fight Povetkin or else. It's nonsense, obviously, with these
telling Mendoza to do it.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. I mean, so now they can move on. That contract has probably been signed for a while now, but we'll get it. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, but eventually you've got to make the 1 and 2 guys fight each other. And in the meantime, you'll have Tyson Fury building his way back up. And then if he's still, if he's still around by the time that fight is over, and Joshua wins the fight again, we went over this. You'll have a huge domestic showdown there. But it gets a little tiresome talking about the same thing over and over again, especially seeing the fans go ape over this. It's just a bunch of nonsense that they're playing into.
And it's not.
But I think it's good that the fans get on them though, because the fans should be demanding this fight. There's still no good reason. Nobody's got any good reason this fight shouldn't be happening now in the fall. It should be happening. You in heavyweights down the road, if they both keep taking fights, there's always a chance there can be an upset. Then you lose the fight. Now it should be happening now. You got both undefeated guys who are big punchers, and with heavyweights, you can have 2 guys staring at each other, and you can also have a wild explosion that's unlike any other division, especially when you got 2 punchers of this magnitude. Well, you can have it, and it does happen. And
it does.
And Wilder's going to be a lot more aggressive against Joshua. Ortiz was a southpaw. He's going to be a lot more aggressive against Joshua than he will be against Ortiz. He doesn't have any style thing he's got to figure out there. And they're both big. They're both big punchers. I mean, who doesn't want to see 2 big heavyweight punchers get in with each other? Come on, Mike. Come on, Mike.
When does Joshua knock somebody out with 1 shot?
You just go ahead and make your argument that Wilder and Joshua aren't big punchers.
They're not big punchers. I don't remember seeing Joshua cold cocking somebody with 1 shot, putting them face down. Can you tell me one? Because I don't remember it.
I don't need to. One guy's gone the distance with them, so
okay.
His punching power has been proven to be pretty good so far.
Whatever.
I don't know what that might be something that would make you a huge puncher. When you had 100% KO percentage and you just lost 100%.
Well, but
you might be a big puncher.
He's fighting shit though. The competition is shit.
Well, I mean, obviously he's a heavy puncher. I mean, but really that should be 2 people who've gone the distance. I mean, Takam was really jobbed in that anyways, but it's all for inflation anyways. I mean, they couldn't take it away from Parker, so they didn't. I mean, I think Wilder can crack. I mean, obviously that's always been the intrigue to the heavyweight division is generally these guys can punch, and generally all it takes is 1 punch to turn the fight around. That's the intrigue, but again, I don't really see. I don't know. I don't really see these guys as because they're the 1 and 2 guys. That piques my interest, and that's something we should focus on more in the sport. But the talent level of these guys doesn't really grab my attention. But I did want to change the subject just real quick. With John talking about the barren wasteland, later in 2018, it is possible. I mean, we are getting. I think we seem to be ignoring that Usyk and Gassiev. Seem to be a done deal as well. And I'm interested to see what's going to happen with Mikey Garcia. And I know, Mike, you and I talked about this off air. After Mikey Garcia gets past Robert Easter, will he possibly fight, Vasyl Lomachenko in December when he's eligible to come back? Or will he fight, some of the chatter going around? And I actually wouldn't mind seeing it because I don't think the welterweight division is that strong, but if you saw Mikey Garcia versus Errol Spence Jr.,
I'll take that because Heyman and PBC can get it done. The Crawford thing with Top Rank will wait forever. So yeah, I was thinking that too. I thought, what, the way the rest of this year is looking, if Heyman and PBC can give us Garcia and Errol Spence, if Garcia gets past Easter, which he should. With what else there'll be out there, I mean, I would look forward to that. So I like the talk of that fight, even if it's a tough fight for Mikey Garcia. He'd be taking on the challenge, and then you put that on regular Showtime, that's a good, that would be a good year ender for two top 10 pound for pound guys. So I would take it.
So who would you favor in that fight, Jeremiah?
Well, I'd probably have to favor the bigger guy, Spence. I do think that fight would probably be a little bit more nip and tuck than a lot of people would think. I mean, the thing about Spence is he's physical. I mean, he goes to the body well. I mean, those are two things that don't pose well for a smaller guy like Mikey Garcia. I don't think Garcia's power, he's certainly not going to be a one-punch guy that he was at 126, 135 against Spence, but I still think that he hits hard enough above 140 pounds because you look at his weigh-in, his weight the night of the fight against Sergey Lipinets, and obviously he's probably, I didn't get any numbers, but he's probably a 154 pounder at that moment, and he knocked Lipinets down, who I think has a pretty good chin. So you couple that with Errol Spence's, defensive lapses. He's Garcia's best punch is a straight right hand. He's got a superb jab and awesome technique. And I'm thinking, Spence is going to get cracked a number of times. I'd probably favor the bigger Spence to wear him down late and stop him, but I think it'd be an intriguing fight. In fact, I'd find that more intriguing than a fight against Sean Porter or Danny Garcia, who could potentially get that fight instead.
All right, John.
Yeah, I agree with Jeremiah. I think at this stage, Mikey Garcia is so good, and he seems like a guy that wants to be great to me. I'd rather see him take the shot against Errol Spence than Danny Garcia or Sean Porter, which was what we would kind of be hoping for Spence before the end of the year, and they've kind of already ruled that one out. So I like Mikey Garcia has that talk. I don't think he can beat Errol Spence, though. I think what people are missing about Errol Spence, and they do the same thing with Jarrett Hurd, and that's one of the things I actually like about these two guys so much, is if you watch Errol Spence and Jarrett Hurd's entire career and you watch some of their earlier fights, these guys can box too. I mean, they just fight in a style where they know they can get a guy out of there. They work and they get aggressive to get him out. But these guys have boxing skills, and I think that's what's going to be a tough package when you fight either of these guys. Presuming Jarrett Hurd, he recently reported he's got a rotator cuff injury. Presuming that doesn't set him back. But what I'm getting to with both men, I think for me it applies to both of these guys, although Spence is a better boxer than Hurd, I think. But they're both good when they want to be. And I think it's that when they're going to be in fights with tougher opponents, and Mikey Garcia certainly would be one of them. If Jarrett Hurd ends up fighting Jermell Charlo, they can box too if they get in a tough spot. They've got boxing skill. These are not one-dimensional guys. I think some people are that have maybe seen Spence or Hurd more recently, that they're thinking that that's just the way these guys have to fight all the time, and that's the way they fight. But these guys have a lot of boxing skill, and they're multi-dimensional. I think that's what's going to be tough for anybody to beat them.
Yeah, but so is Mikey Garcia. I think the difference is there. Spence is just bigger.
Well, I agree. Now, I agree with you. Mikey Garcia is a multi-dimensional guy too, and
I think
this is one where
I think that what Jeremiah said about the body punching with Spence will be the difference, because I think Garcia is a better defensive fighter than Spence.
I think Spence can fight defensively if he wants to. I don't know if he'd have to do that against Mikey Garcia, but I mean, there's going to be some point where he's tested even more than he was against Brooke, where he might have to box more, and the same might happen with Hurd. But I think with Mikey Garcia, I mean, in this case, clearly this is where, weight gets overrated, but this is not one of those situations, because Mikey Garcia started out as a featherweight. Then, he's been fighting most recently. He's going to fight again as a lightweight. Spence is a welterweight. That's a real weight class jump. That's not the artificial weight class jump.
It's kind of like when Juan Manuel Marquez jumps up from 135 to 147 to fight Mayweather.
Right. Those are real weight class jumps. Those are in the original 8. When there's an original 8 weight class jump, that's when I pay attention to it. And that's basically the modern day equivalent of what you'd have here with Mikey Garcia and Errol Spence.
Well,
so
and I think
that's
if
where
you
you
had
take it into
an
account.
original 8, John, Mikey Garcia would still be a lightweight.
Right. He'd be a lightweight and Errol Spence would be a welterweight.
And
that's why the way I like to evaluate things, because I think those are actually better evaluations. And that's where, Mikey Garcia is going to be at a size disadvantage here.
Yeah, and the thing about this is, Mikey Garcia, to me, if you only had 8 divisions, we could be potentially talking about a guy who is a featherweight and a lightweight champion. I mean, that would be pretty big stuff back in the day. I mean, he was good enough. He came up before Lomachenko. He was certainly good enough to get that done. So really Garcia is a damn good fighter. Unfortunately, he really hasn't tested himself against the very best in the world. But, if he were to go up and fight Spence, you'd have to give the guy credit, because I know Garcia still gets a lot of crap because he kind of seems to be, even though he seems to be willing to fight whomever, he hasn't fought whomever. And he seems to be just kind of at a loss in terms of direction of where he wants to go. He wants to go, he acts like he wants to be here, he wants to be there, he wants to be wherever. He's kind of got to sort that out as well. But I mean, imagine if he were to go fight Spence, maybe move back down to 135, fight Lomachenko. I mean, that's some old school stuff, and he deserves to be commended for it. I mean, even the jump against Spence is old school stuff, and he deserve a pat on the back for that. But it'd be an interesting fight.
Well, doesn't it make more sense to go down and fight Lomachenko and then go up and fight Spence?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, obviously with Lomachenko's injury, they said he won't be. They said he won't be available until December. I don't really know the finer details of the injury itself, and if that's what they want to do, I mean, I would certainly welcome it. I would prefer him to fight Lomachenko and then Spence afterwards. I mean, that would be my ideal matchup, but I just don't know, with injury, if that's going to keep keep Lomachenko out too long, because they said December. I don't know, maybe that with recovery rates and stuff, you never know. Maybe it'll push him back until January of next year, and Garcia want to stay busy in that time. I don't know.
I can tell you this.
I'm just assuming Top Rank wouldn't do it. That's all. I mean,
John,
they did let Linares fight, but I'm just assuming they wouldn't do it.
John, there's one fight that I really want to see, though. And if you give me this fight, I would rather see it than Joshua and Wilder. I'd rather see it than Triple G and Canelo. And that fight would be Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence against Adrian Broner. We'll call it once and for all.
Well, who is this? Somebody good? What were they talking about? Josh Taylor fighting Broner now? I mean, somehow, Broner, because he gets
as long
these ratings,
as somebody is going to kick his ass, I'll watch it.
I mean, I did see that. I thought, man, because Broner gets these ratings, but you got to worry about Broner's situation.
I think his situation's too far gone to save him, anyways. Now. Yeah,
but I like what Jeremiah was saying about the matchups with Garcia and Spence important. I think it reminded me. I still, even though people like to knock about what didn't happen with it, I see this barren wasteland we're talking about and stuff, and it reminds me. I still, now we're talking 3-4 years later, I still like what PBC tried to do though, because here's a couple of things, because maybe even still in the future, even if it didn't work the way they wanted it to, it could be a blueprint for some good things, which is one, when Heyman built depth, okay, ultimately to avoid all these promotional conflicts, if you're going to put guys together and get good matchups, you got to have depth to make them. Even if you're like when they put on their FS1 cards, so then the matchups on the undercards are more competitive in the main events, even though they're lesser known guys, or some of the good showtimes cards they put on this year, earlier in the year, they've got depth. Like, in other words, they can put Mikey Garcia in with Errol Spence, when the Terrence Crawford things, looking hopeless for Spence because of promotional stuff. And then they were trying to be on basic cable, free broadcast TV, getting guys exposure. Now, the problem was, as we talked about, there was at times that, on the regular TV, they didn't put their best matchups on. Sometimes they did with things like, Garcia and Thurman and Porter, but other times they didn't. But if they would have maybe gotten some more of their better matchups on regular TV. But I just think, well, at least what they were trying to do, and even still what they've got with some of the good Showtime fights they showed in the first half of the year, we're not seeing as many set for the second half unless we get something like Spence Garcia, and maybe we will. They've got the depth, but you look at, like, we're talking about these Gilberto Ramirez fights with Top Rank, and then they're on ESPN, but just garbage.
Hey, but
and,
I
you
think
see
I did
Golden
see that
Boy.
Andre Berto is going to fight Devin Alexander.
Right, and that's bad, and then that's bad by PBC. I agree. I mean, that does not belong. That does not belong on premium cable. So I don't like to see them.
Dude, that
that
doesn't
would be one of their
belong
misses
on local cable access.
Right. I mean, that should, and I hate to see them. They have done it before, but I hate to see stuff like that out of them because they've done some of the good stuff. The other promoters haven't done much anything. Like, that Golden Boy on ESPN card. I mean, you got, all right, there's guys supposedly prospects, but all the fights are mismatches. There was a guy with a 7-16 record on there fighting in one of those.
Yeah, I don't
fights
even watch
Friday
that
night.
stuff because if you got a Golden Boy card, you got a ton of guys that are like 9-0 against guys that are like 2-6.
I know, everybody, but those fights should not be on TV. That's the point. If you're going to have those are not TV fights. You don't televise those fights.
No,
it's just absurd, and that's because they've got no depth, and they won't put their guys against each other. At least the PBC guys will fight each other sometimes, but it's you got to have more of what PBC was trying to do at least.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Jeremiah, any final thoughts or anything you wanted to bring up?
No, I think we covered about all the bases. I mean, one thing that I will just mention briefly is that in the most recent update of this whole, Joshua Wilder madness, it seems as if Hearn, is saying that this, the Joshua Wilder fight can happen on April 13th in Wembley Arena. That was probably his plan all along. I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, well, it'll happen as long as one of them doesn't lose. I think it'd be great if both of them get knocked out. Maybe we could have Dominic Brazil against
Povetkin
and fight that in Wembley.
For the
goes.
Povetkin versus
I'd still like to
Brazil.
see these guys fight when they're undefeated.
Hey, but you know what? This is the thing. If Povetkin and Brazil both win, they'll probably be immediately stripped. So we can still have the vacant title in Wembley between Wilder and Joshua. All right, guys.
Or something.
Crazy. It'll be something stupid. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. We'll be here every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock on thegruelingtruth.net with the Inside Boxing Weekly Show. Make sure you check out our sponsor, the Retired Boxers Foundation, with Alex Ramos, Jackie Richardson. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Anywhere you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, John Einreinhofer, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.